Hello, welcome. Once again, I'm Imran Garda and you are in the stream. Today, Brazil's disappearing favelas. Ahead of Rio's World Cup and Olympic Games, the government is pushing to clean up its well-known slums. But at what cost to the people? Filling in for Ahmed once again this week is Malika Bilal, who will be looking out for all your live feedback. Hi, Malika.
Hi, good to be here.
Good. Well, with her on the couch is Mustafa Akyol, a Turkish writer and author of Islam Without Extremes, a Muslim Case for Liberty. Mustafa, there are a lot of books out there regarding Islam in the post-9/11 world. What makes this one any different?
Well, after 9/11, people started to discuss about Islam, understandably, but few books, I would say, concentrated on what I'm concentrating on in my book, which is the question of liberty in the Muslim tradition. There are obviously authoritarian elements in the Muslim world. There are coercive practices in the Muslim world, such as the religious police in Saudi Arabia, or the bans on apostasy or blasphemy. And in my book, what I'm trying to do is to create an Islamic argument against these coercive practices. Because first of all, I think that they do not create genuine piety as they hope to do so. They rather create hypocrisy most of the time. And secondly, I'm showing that these coercive elements do not come from the very core of Islam, to which I'm deeply committed, but they come from historical interpretations, historical context. For example, the ban on apostasy, which is very much discussed in classical Islamic law, it doesn't come from the Quran. The Quran actually supports religious freedom with several verses, but it comes from a medieval interpretation in which medieval scholars thought that whoever leaves the Muslim community will join the enemy army that they're fighting. So this was seen as a political treason at the time, but today it's a big problem if that medieval law is brought to today without any reinterpretation and imposed on people who simply change their religion out of their genuine
But difficult to write
convictions.
about this given that the Muslim world is not a monolith, is it?
It is not. I mean, the Muslim world is simply not monolithic, and I mean, there are very authoritarian systems, and there are more, democratic societies in the Muslim world. In Turkey, where I'm coming from, I would say most of the coercive elements in Islam are really sidelined because there has been an evolution of Islamic thought within the Ottoman Empire and in Republican Turkey, as I try to also show in my book. But there are still issues, and I think embracing liberty, embracing freedom is one of the most key issues in the Muslim world for today. I think that there's no incompatibility with that, with a free society and the basic principles of Islam, but there are problems between historical interpretations. And I think Muslims need to rethink these issues. So my book is a call on all fellow Muslims to rethink some of the practices that we think sometimes that is Islamic, but actually maybe it's not Islamic at all. It's just maybe some tradition.
Okay, looking forward to all of your thoughts over the next 48 hours. You'll be on the couch again tomorrow, and feel free to add, to contribute to today's discussion regarding Brazil.
Thanks so much.
As well. Now, as always, you can tell us what stories matter to you. That's the whole point of the show, isn't it? Follow us on Twitter, send a tweet with the hashtag AJStream. We could feature your suggestion in a future episode.
Online activists in the occupied West Bank are calling for a 24-hour hunger strike Wednesday in support of Palestinian political prisoners detained in Israeli jails. The strike is aimed at raising awareness about what organizers say are escalating series of punitive measures being taken against Palestinians by Israeli prison officials. Now, the call is spreading like wildfire on the web under the hashtag HS4Palestine. From Algeria to Canada, supporters around the world are pledging their intent to join the hunger strike. The campaign has also caught the attention of cartoonist Carlos Latouf, who tweeted this drawing in solidarity. And time to coincide with the strike, Palestinian rap group Dem released their first single from their new album, Risala Min Zinzana. Take a listen to it here. It tells the story of 3 detainees who were determined to make their stories heard. Well, you can continue to track the hunger strike on Twitter using the hashtags seen on your screen here. But that's just one of the stories we're following. We're also tracking reaction to a controversial Saudi plan to expand the Grand Mosque in Mecca, much to the dismay of some people who say doing so will cause the destruction of religiously historic sites. Send us your thoughts on the expansion plan. Just tweet us with the hashtag AJStream. Now, here's a look at some of the stream's top Twitter contributors.
Thousands of people in Rio's favelas are being evicted from their homes to make way for new roads and construction for Brazil's 2014 World Cup and the 2016 Summer Olympic Games. But is the government making existing problems of security and development for favela residents even worse? Well, online, people from various at-risk neighborhoods are creating their own videos to document forced evictions and try to raise awareness. Let me show you a video from the group Witness. It's a group that distributes cameras for locals to document rights abuses. And this particular testimony I'm going to show you is from a favela resident named Antonieta. Let me play this for you.
Então, meu nome é Antonieta, sou do Largo do Campinho, comunidade pelo qual foi removida. E a experiência que ficou para essas remoções que aconteceram foram muito tristes, porque nós tivemos que sair das nossas casas sem querer e ter que estar num lugar onde a gente não queria, um lugar que não é melhor e nem igual ao que a gente estava. Sendo simplesmente porque eles queriam passar uma estrada. O projeto não foi discutido com a comunidade, nós não participamos de maneira alguma, sim, nos sentimos sem valor algum. O vídeo, ao mesmo momento...
So basically we had no input in the process and we weren't really cared for. Antonieta's story there. Well, joining us now from Rio to help us explain all of this is Teresa Williamson. She's the Executive Director of Catalytic Communities, which is a Rio-based non-profit group that works with local community organizers. Also from Brazil, we have Manuel Tedim. I'm not sure what city you're in. Manuel, where are you? Are you in Brasilia or Rio?
I'm in Rio.
Oh, you're
also.
in Rio too.
How are you?
Manuel Tedim is in Rio as well. I'm good, thank you. Let me tell the viewers about your credentials. You're an economist and executive director of the Institute for Studies on Labor and Society, which is a Rio-based think tank. Thank you both of you, Manuel and Teresa, for joining us. Manuel, if I could start with you. In the preparation for the World Cup, which of course we must reiterate is going to be held in the whole country, Brazil, and the Olympic Games, which is going to be Rio specific, in the preparations for those two events, is it coming at a price, and is the price being paid by favela residents?
Well, actually the whole point is to invest and leave a legacy to the whole city. Of course, there is a price to be paid, but housing problems did not happen overnight. We have problems with housing in favelas for over 100 years in Rio. So this is something that should have been dealt with many decades ago, and for the lack of public policies in housing, this trouble lagged on, and it just increased for the last basically on the last 20 years, it increased very, very much. Something has to be done. Of course, there are individual prices to be paid, and people that live in these settlements will certainly pay them. The whole point is the government should compensate these people to live in better housing projects and establish a policy that is solid and consistent over time.
Okay, Teresa, you've been doing work on the ground. You've been meeting these people, speaking to them. Those that are being evicted, are they going to better places, or are they going to places that are going to make them worse off?
Yeah, unfortunately, the evictions are happening. The reason they're evictions is they're forced. I mean, if they were not forced, we'd be calling them relocation. People are not happy to go because the housing, unfortunately, doesn't tend to be better. We've seen most people are being sent to a part of the city called Cosmos, which is far west. It can be up to 50 kilometers from their original homes. And this area is controlled by vigilante militias who, there's extortion. People aren't allowed to practice religion outside of their homes. They're not allowed to create businesses inside their homes. There are all these restrictions on the public housing. They've been relocated, not as whole communities, sometimes a few residents here, a few residents there, so they lose all of their solidarity, all their networks that they've established over decades or sometimes generations.
I want to play another little clip here. This is courtesy of Rio on Watch TV, video that we found on YouTube, giving us an idea as to how some people are reacting to the evictions and the reasons residents are being given to leave. And just a reminder again, this is from Rio on Watch TV. Let's take a taste of this.
Estão alegando que isso aqui é área de risco. Para onde eles vão colocar essas pessoas? Os moradores que moram aqui? Para onde eles querem? Ou a gente tem a opção de escolha? Lógico que a gente vai ter a opção de escolha. A opção da minha escolha é continuar na minha casa.
Porque a gente mora lá já há mais de 10 anos. Nunca deu problema nenhum. Agora que eles vêm falar isso. Falar que vai remover a casa das pessoas, vai dar uma ligação social. E pior que na época que fizeram...
Manuel, I think at the heart of all of this, the fact that people don't have a choice is a central theme which is spurring anger. Could there not have been a better way of going about this?
This isn't a simple problem to be solved. Rio has over 1.1 million people living in favelas. Of course, if you look at each household individually and some communities, you'll find very dramatic and tragic things happening. But the point of the fact is that something has to be done. It should have been dealt with decades ago, and now there's an opportunity. Are public policies the best possible? I don't think so. I don't think this was thought through as much as it should have. But again, relocations will be necessary, and to diminish density in most favelas is actually called for because they live in a very precarious neighborhoods with health issues and lack of public policies and the rule of law. There's also another point, which of course is the fault of the government over the last decades, is that these people just took over either private properties or public properties and planted their houses on. Why did they do that? They didn't have anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we've lost the audio from Manuel for the moment. We hope we can reestablish the connection there. Malika, you want to come in there?
I would. I'd like to pick up on that because both guests mentioned that something has to be done and compensation should be given. We have a tweet here from Tom Rizzo who says, shame on Brazil government for not using the evictions to upgrade conditions for favela dwellers. So it looks like we might have lost our guests. Maybe I can open this up to you, Mustafa.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on the situation in Brazil, but I can say we had similar issues in Turkey. We used to have our own favelas, like shanty towns.
Right.
And the Turkish government in the past decades really uprooted many of them and built these more modern big apartments and moved families there. But the conditions of those people certainly got improved. That's why many of them were happy to be actually moved that way. So I think, I mean, individual freedom is of course important and people should have the right to live wherever they want, but also sometimes government can do some arrangements because we'll live together in big urban spaces.
Right.
But this should be made sure that, you know, their conditions will improve. Secondly, this should continue a negotiation and a dialogue between them. If just some you know, bulldozers come one day in the morning and say, we're moving you to some unknown place, people will be worried about that, definitely. So I understand the government can have a project like that, but it should not be done without the consent of the people. And that consent will probably come through, you know, through insurement, by making sure that their conditions will be much better, and this should be explained to them, not rushed, you know, and just not imposed on them right away.
Okay. I understand Teresa is back, so we can get back in touch with Teresa Williamson. Teresa.
Yeah.
Can you see me?
See her
Yeah,
now.
we can see you and we can hear you. Teresa, there was a tweet that Malika had read out where one of the viewers had said, shame on the Brazil government for not improving the conditions of the favelas. However, in fairness to the Brazil government, looking at some of the statistics here, I've got something in front of me which says that the proportion of the population living in slum conditions has dropped 16% since the year 2000 because of the improvements to the favelas and the living conditions, and that some favelas are actually being redefined. They're becoming lower middle class areas. Teresa, should we not be giving credit where credit is due to the Brazil government, that they are improving the conditions in certain instances?
Okay, yeah, I'd like to, before we get to that real quick, I just wanted to say there's an underlying assumption that's been made in the whole conversation so far, which is that favelas are slums.
Right.
People use the word slum, shantytown, squatter community, ghetto. None of these are accurate for the vast majority of Rio's favelas. As Manuel pointed out, their favelas are over 100 years old. You can imagine how much people have been able to accomplish in building their homes over that much time in a country that has the strongest squatters' rights in the world, or among them. So in Brazil, in theory, the government would give people title after 5 years occupying land. Adverse possession, adverse possession exists in countries around the world, including the United States. So people occupy land, it's given a purpose, nobody else claims trespassing within a certain amount of time, it's theirs. And because Brazil has these strong laws on the books, in theory, people invested more, and people do invest more. People invest everything they have. So you're right that the conditions in these communities have improved dramatically over decades. And I would agree with Manuel that something should have been done when these communities were first settled, as happened in the US and Europe when the first slums formed. But what's happened in Brazil is the communities have been there so long. They've been able to establish, so they're not slums in the sense that there's squalor. There is squalor. There are slum conditions in some favelas, but that's not the standard. They're not shanties in the sense that the houses are made out of cardboard or wood. They're mostly brick. They're several stories high often. They're not squatters because they're given they're supposed to be given legal title after a few years. And they're not ghettos because people want to be there. People don't want to leave these neighborhoods where they've formed strong networks, strong ties over decades. And when people visit these neighborhoods, they're often struck by the stereotype and the stigma that they've heard about through the press and historically through word of mouth from actually have not been to these communities.
Okay.
And so, and so this is why you're seeing such strong resistance, where the ones that are in squalor conditions do want to leave.
Right.
They do want to be relocated.
Okay.
So what the government needs to do is upgrade these neighborhoods, because a favela is nothing less than an unserved community.
Okay, not all favelas are the same. Point taken, and articulately put. These favelas vary, vastly in terms of the socioeconomic conditions. Manuel, one of those that was deemed perhaps one of the worst because it was taken over by the drug gangs was Complexo do Alemão. And in November, you had the army go in. They took in an immense amount of firepower to get rid of the drug gangs. In March, we were told that it was completely cleared of the drug gangs and that the army was overseeing the rebuilding of the place. However, just last week, the violence kicked off again in Complexo do Alemão. How much does that tell us about the problems that are intrinsic to many of these slums, particularly when it involves the drug gangs, and how much of a challenge does that suggest that lies ahead for the Brazilian government?
I'd say that's the main challenge. I mean, you had over the last 30 years, and this is quite a recent occurrence, which got worse for the last 20 or 30 years, is that the drug trafficking gangs took over some of these territories. So the first stage of any public policies in these areas is exactly to take over the territory for the government and reestablish the rule of law. That is being done favela by favela. It's a quite difficult task. No one thinks that trafficking will be eliminated thoroughly from all favelas. You have people pushing drugs probably on 3rd Avenue in New York or wherever. I mean, but the whole point is that these territories, which were reoccupied by the police, and in this case by the army, are being regained, and a certain level of security is reestablished. I think that's a basic move to start the development of these areas. Just like to point out again that favelas are not all the same. They're quite different, basically in different locations of the city. But you do not have, in most of them, in some, or at least in some areas of these favelas, you have health issues, you have sanitation issues, you have a lack of a full presence of the state taking care of the livelihoods of these areas, of the well-being of these areas. So there's a lot to be done, and the first stage is, of course, regaining the territory for the city and reestablishing peace.
Okay. Okay, come in.
I mean, I think the situation is obviously very complex, and that was a good point which was mentioned. It's not just that people will get nicer houses. People also have networks. They have memories. They have families. They have neighborhoods in the place
Kids
they're
at
living.
schools,
So yeah, it's probably maybe not possible to compensate that. That's why, I mean, a process like this has to be reasoned, and it should be gradual based on the consent of the people. The problem here is, as I understand, the Brazilian government just want to prepare the city for the Olympics, which is coming, and that's a different concern. But the choices of the individuals who lives in those places should be certainly taken into account.
Okay, Malika,
well, if I could just jump in here, this is a question for Teresa.
May I have a...
Okay, Manuel, quick response, Manuel. We've got 3 minutes left on the program,
Sure.
so quick response, and then Malika will come in.
I don't think that's quite fair. The city has been investing in favelas for the last at least 20 years, a serious investment in favelas. Are they perfect? No, they're far from perfect. But to say that these investments are being done just now isn't quite true. And there's another point, that the city must regain the rule of law and must function in a good way. So we can't just let people live wherever they want. Of course, they've been there. Some of them have been there for a long time. Let's study, have a public policy in place, and compensate these people adequately.
Okay, Manuel, well put. Malika?
Well, this is a question for Teresa. I mean, we've talked a lot about the downsides of this, but what are the upsides to having it? We have a tweet here that says people should be happy with what is happening, otherwise it will be against the whole spirit of the events. And then one more from Hisham Shihabi, who says you can't have a World Cup stage in Rio and expect residents of favelas not to be engaged. Is there opportunity for people of these communities to be engaged with the games?
There are a few initiatives to teach English in some favelas so people can learn, can be tour guides, things like that. There will be a few things. And, I jumped for joy when Rio was selected to host the Olympics. I think I was very naive. And most of Rio's civil society did, and community organizations and people in the favelas. And Vila Autódromo, which is the community that's smack down right near the Olympics, next to the Olympic site, that has been identified as basically does not need to be removed. It's being removed because of real estate speculators' interest in the area. They're 40 years there. They've got land title. It's an easily upgradable community. The people there, as you walk through, they're dismayed because they were excited for Rio winning the Olympic bid. So I think there's a lot of mixed feelings in these communities. People thought it was a good thing, and now they think it's not.
Okay,
and
Teresa, can I jump in there for a second?
Well,
Teresa,
they think of it as a commercial event and not a sporting
event.
event.
Teresa, we have run out of time on the main program. We're going to continue this discussion. Don't go away. We're going to continue this discussion in the post show on stream.aljazeera.com. So stay where you are. But for the TV show, we have run out of time. Teresa, Manuel, Mustafa, thanks a lot for this.
My pleasure. See you tomorrow as well.
Discussion. Malika as well. Thanks for that. Tomorrow we talk about whether Turkey is holding up to its national ideals when it comes to the Kurdish population. Join us then. Welcome back to the post show. Stream.aljazeera.com is where you're watching us. Malika, it was heating up a little bit.
It was
Twitter.
getting good. A lot of Twitter comments. Basically, we have one that had a good question that I wanted to ask and didn't get a chance to. When we get Skype back up, I will.
Again, yeah.
Do liberal squatter laws impede effective delivery of services and infrastructure construction? I think that was a good one, maybe for Teresa to answer.
Well, what's been any common threads in the Twitter feedback over the show?
Actually, it's been kind of split. Some people saying that people should be happy, and with the opportunities that the games could provide for Brazil, this could be a good thing. And other people saying that you are forcing people from their homes, which is of course a bad thing.
I think I'm trying to look at this from a political, principles perspective, and there's a tension here between the government trying to do something for the common good,
right,
and then the individuals having their own dreams. And there's another element: the gangs, at least in some favelas, which impose their own authoritarian rule. So should the government save people from the local, authoritarian gangs? They should. I think the government should take care of that. But then there's the other issue of individuals having their own purposes and dreams and their own wishes. And I think governments should mess with that only by talking with them, dialogue with them. And I'm certainly not an expert on the Brazilian situation, but I think here's an interesting situation that we can infer some broader lessons about the role of governments.
Yeah, we'll talk about broader lessons when we get them back up. Have we got Skype, Katie? Are they back up yet? We've got Teresa. Teresa's up, and we can try and get Manuel up as well. Teresa, one of the questions I want to ask you is regarding the World Cup and the Olympic Games. Is it for prestige, or does the government really believe that there's going to be some sort of trickle-down economic benefit for the country as well?
The government definitely says that. That's definitely the message that's passed. Can you see me? Sorry?
Yes, we can see you clearly, hear you clearly.
Great. Yeah, the government, that's definitely the message that's passed on, you see, to the general population through the mainstream media, is that this is going to trickle down, it's going to help people on the ground. But the question is, the favelas people, Rio is going through a real estate boom. It's actually pretty outrageous. I mean, things have doubled in just a few years across the city. So what's happening is the people in the favelas can't afford to stay in some areas, and then these areas are getting evicted. So what's happening is there's a huge push west and north of people in these communities. As that happens, it means they're further from jobs, they're further from schools, they're further from infrastructure, and at the same time, the city has projects to develop the port area into a kind of high commerce area, when that's federal land, and that could be easily used for housing, and it's near centers of business and jobs and so on. So they're just, when you actually look at the big picture of what's happening and where people are being sent and where people are ending up, there's actually not a lot of hope for the poorest.
Yeah.
And Brazil's already one of the most unequal income distributions on earth. The case of Rio in Brazil, it's been going down for the last 11 and a half years. It's actually been getting better, but Rio has actually not improved.
If I told you, Teresa, if I told you that Mexico, which held the Football World Cup in 1986, didn't have any economic benefits from that World Cup. If I gave you the example of Greece's Olympics, the Athens Olympics in 2006, you look at Greece's economy now, even though the two are not directly linked, but there wasn't this major boost for the economy.
No
if I gave you the South African example from last year, there was so much hope that there would be trickle down economic benefits for the vast majority of South Africans. FIFA had its most lucrative World Cup ever. The South African government spent $5 million, and apart from the infrastructural developments of these stadia, which basically became white elephants, many of them unused now, there's been no grassroots economic development. If I give you all of those examples, do you think that Brazil could perhaps learn from the failures of these other countries, or that this is doomed to fail because while there may be prestige and it may be wonderful to see a World Cup and an Olympic Games on your soil, apart from that, there's not much else that can that can boost the coffers of the nation.
No, absolutely, and that's we're actually talking to cities, people in communities and cities around the world who have experienced these events, to share ideas, share stories, share experiences, see how we can try to make Rio different. I don't think it's going to be different because of the government. I think it's only going to be different if civil society continues to organize. And unfortunately, I'd like to see better leadership from the city and from the state and federal governments on these issues. There's no reason why the legacy from these events couldn't be a true upgrading of these neighborhoods that are already quite developed on their own. What they need is services. They need to be integrated rather than expelled from their land. We're seeing that the evictions that happen are happening in areas with real estate potential where nobody's ever heard of them. And then the communities like Alemão, which you mentioned, where people have heard of it, it's infamous for drug trafficking, it's central, it's big, there are a lot of votes. Those communities are getting public sector investment. So we're seeing that actually it seems like just a big PR campaign on the part of the city. How do we make it look like we're helping these communities, but actually we're trying to take care of real estate interests?
Okay, Teresa, that's where we're going to love you and leave you. Thank you very much for
Thank
your
you. I wish
contribution
I
to
could
the
be
program.
more positive. I really do.
You were fantastic, and there's so much more to say.
I mean, about what's happening.
Well,
yeah.
there's so much more to say with regards to this topic. We'll be talking more and more about it in the weeks and months ahead as that World Cup draws closer, as well as the Olympic Games. But of course, we're not just interested in Brazil just because of sporting events. So I hope we get to speak to you sometime soon. Teresa, thanks for joining us. And of course, Manuel Tedim, he also joined us via Skype. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the connection back up for the post-show. Engaging, fascinating discussion. We've also got some other things on the menu, don't we, Malika? There's some other stories that we've been touching upon and considering covering in depth. Give us a taste, Malika.
Exactly. Well, one of the things we're following is a story out of Saudi Arabia and Riyadh. Saudi's religious police have arrested a Colombian footballer. He was walking around in the mall with a sleeveless t-shirt, and he is covered in tattoos. And the religious police say that this sets a bad example for Saudi's youth. Yeah. You know a little bit of something about religious police.
I mean, that's what I'm criticizing really in my book, Islam Without Extremes. By having a religious police, Saudi Arabia or any government who employs such institutions claim that they have access to what is true Islam. We know what it is right. That's one thing. Secondly, they're imposing this on every people in their country. And I think, first of all, this is wrong for two reasons. Who knows what's the right interpretation of Islam? A medieval Islamic school of thought said, we don't know, so let's postpone this decision to afterlife. And I think that's the best answer in Islamic tradition. They were called the postponers. Secondly, if you impose what is Islamic on people, are you making them really pious or are you making them hypocrites? I mean, if a police forces people to go to a mosque, for example, do people go to mosque because they want to worship God, or do they go to mosque because they fear the police? So there's this inconsistency in the very basic logic of having a religious police.
And ironically, the Saudis really welcome these foreign footballers. They pay them copious amounts of money in order to add that sort of prestige to the league. So the Mutawa and the Saudi Football Association, I think, are going in different directions.
Certainly, and the clash there is between the footballers and just, women are not allowed to drive and all those coercive measures in Saudi Arabia. And I think the Saudis refer to a particular Quranic concept while doing this, commending the right and forbidding the wrong. But in my book, I showed that actually this has been interpreted in various ways in Islamic thought. And actually the early interpretators of this principle understood this as the proclamation of the truth. But there's a big difference between proclamation of the truth and the imposition of what you call as the truth.
Okay, so if you have tattoos on your arms in Saudi Arabia, wear long sleeves when you go to the shopping mall. Malika, next story.
That is basically the message. Well, across the world, we have a story that we're following in Poland, which is a Facebook initiative. It's basically crowdsourcing your politics. A bunch of young people took to Facebook to create a group to influence the outcome of Poland's parliamentary elections, which happened 2 days ago. And they managed to put enough pressure on politicians to get at least one law changed, a law that enacted a 3-year punishment for smoking marijuana. So this got reduced based on this Facebook initiative.
Okay, so the politicians are listening to the online campaigns. That's an interesting development. One more.
Well, we've all heard about the We Are the 99% Tumblr. Now another group has come out with the We Are the 53%. You can see this on my screen here. I'll enlarge it a little bit. Basically, this is a group of people who say that they are the 53% of Americans who pay federal income taxes. And it's kind of poking fun at the Occupy Wall Street protests. There's a sign here from one man who says, "I started working after school before I was in 8th grade. Occupiers of Wall Street, nobody ever drowned in their own sweat. Get a job and occupy it with gusto."
Okay, well, there seems to be a bit of a middle-class pushback, middle-class capitalist pushback to the Occupy Wall Street movement. You can, of course, expand on these stories. Tweet us, send us your Facebook posts on the stream, like us on Facebook, and send us your comments. We'll be continuing to give you little bits of stories throughout the week in the post show, so that you can give us some feedback, and perhaps we could expand these into segments within a show or even full shows themselves. But for now, that's just about it. We've run out of time. Mustafa, good to have you on the infamous
Thanks for having
Orange
me.
Couch.
It's my pleasure.
Tomorrow, when we talk more specifically about Turkey, the Kurds, and other issues
All those
related to Islam and Islamophobia here in the US, I think it will be right up your alley. So look forward to your thoughts then.
Thanks.
Malika, well done.
Thank
It's
you.
been your, 7th or 8th appearance already?
Oh, yeah, I guess so.
You're getting quite good at this.
7 more.
Yeah, Ahmed should be quaking in his boots. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Oh, thanks for joining us on stream.aljazeera.com. In a couple of hours' time, the entire show will be reposted. So if you really love us, you can watch us again and again and again. If not, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.